accomplishing is on the way. Oh, well, you're welcome. There's some very significant support that's coming from, you want to talk about that? Or?
Well, we're going to announce soon, in the next few weeks, I hope, a grant from, or a loan, I should say, from the Department of Economic and Community Development to help match up with some private sector money to really make this thing get up and running in a more significant way. So we're kind of excited about that opportunity. Right on.
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly, I want to thank the governor for his vision on the problem that we face here in Connecticut. I've been involved in economic development coming up on 18 years now, mainly through the Connecticut Development Authority and loosely through the Connecticut Innovations Group. And he's exactly right. There hasn't, in over 20 years, been a net new job created here in the state of Connecticut. And I can tell you that just CDA alone has created or preserved 128 to 130,000 jobs. So it's a very challenging situation because we're losing that many jobs to have essentially zero net job growth. He's got a great vision and he's got a great team. You know, Commissioner Smith here comes with a great deal of energy. At the end of the day, I have to believe that's what it takes. Patty, of course, down here is doing a great job as well. That's what it takes to create the kind of buzz that I think all of you are referring to here is energy, is a vision, and creating a great environment for not just younger companies, but for all companies. And you know, on the other side of the aisle, so I'll make arguments, you know, on the floor that we need to reduce taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you look at other places where they have great entrepreneurial action occurring, and they have high tax rates also. So it clearly boils down to Connecticut being able to create a buzz, creating some critical mass. Somehow there were some great ideas coming around the table here today, and I know these two up here and Patty also are great listeners. And I think out of these kinds of discussions will come some great idea that puts Connecticut on the map as a place that is a real friend of business and friend of entrepreneurship and a friend of a thriving economy, because we're desperate as a country, and Connecticut needs to get back on the right track. And these two up here, these three up here are doing that. So thank you.
So, you know, let me, every time I think about this issue in the context of Connecticut, it really, the hole we find ourselves in is quite remarkable. George Washington said of Connecticut it was the provision state for the Revolutionary War. And if you think about the Industrial Revolution itself, it took place here in Connecticut. From Eli Whitney to Samuel Holt, whose factory was studied by Henry Ford before he set up his factory. In bioscience and life science, we played a major role. We certainly want to preserve that role and enlarge it. In every other war or revolution or movement, Connecticut has played a paramount role on a national or international basis. And yet, over the last 20 years, we've allowed ourselves to give away certain industries in total to sit back as others took our jobs and not fight back. And so clearly, you know, we are prepared to fight back. And I think there were some very good suggestions made, and certainly your effort, starting with 3 in Westport and growing to over 100, is the kind of local grassroots activity that has to take place in Fairfield County and in New Haven County in particular, those two counties, if we're going to make quick headway in what is our goal. And that's not to say that there's not innovation taking place everywhere else in the state, but I have a firm belief that we really got to kick it in here in Fairfield County, New Haven County, because we have the possibility of quick movement and finding the right way to do that. I think that Catherine, for her part, and I should say, you know, Catherine comes to this job from the private sector, having been an executive both with the Aetna and ING, where she had 3,200 people reporting to her. Now she just has me reporting to her. But you know, we're going to put a package together, and many of the things some of the things I've heard here are new because this is a smaller group, meaning smaller businesses, newer startups, and some of the others that we've talked with, and then some of it is absolutely consistent with what we've heard before. Clearly, the engineering comment that was made. You know, listen, if I could write immigration policy, anybody who gets a master's degree or a doctorate and who's not a citizen gets a green card. That's what I would do today to help solve that problem. I mean, the idea that 60% of those degrees leave our country, not because they necessarily want to leave our country, but because we don't have an immigration policy that's inviting to them, makes no sense at all. And if we could ever get Washington to just concentrate on people with advanced degrees, as a starting point as opposed to a finishing point. But we will bone up our higher education endeavors. One of the things I did in the legislative session was to spearhead a new organizational model for higher education. We took our 4 regionals, so Southern, Central, Eastern, and Western, and actually combined them into one system with our community colleges. And when you talk about technical schools, community colleges can fill that role. They do in other states, and they could in this state if we get serious about making sure that we're giving the course offerings and the certifications necessary for people to find success coming out of those institutions, as well as the ability to go on to a 4-year degree granting institution if they want. We've got to do both, and if we do both well, I think we can make a lot of progress. Catherine and I recently went to a community college, and this less applicable here in Lower Fairfield County, but very applicable in the aerospace industry, where we have 80 aerospace companies in Connecticut. 80, you wouldn't have thought that. Including Pratt & Whitney, which has invested $100 million a year, 10 years in a row on a new technology, brought that technology to market, and hasn't lost a competitive bid for that technology yet. And assuring a level of success in the aerospace industry in Connecticut for the next 20, if not 30 years. But what they don't have, and they're having a hard time coming by, is the human product necessary to bring that product to market on a consistent basis. So we visited, as Nantucket Community College, right? I always have to stop. There's nothing harder than pronouncing or trying to think how to pronounce Nantucket if you're dyslexic, which I am. So, but they're 10 to 12 years in to a training program, which they've done successfully with 100 or 98% placement rates over a long period of time, and yet the program hasn't been replicated in full at any other community college. In a state where we are aging out the folks to do that, machinists, people who can run large machines, $3-4 million machines that cut $300,000 pieces of metal into engine parts, and we can't do that. And so we absolutely have got to change how we're responding to the educational, prepared workforce, human capital side of the equation, particularly if we can jumpstart our economic development efforts. In the short run, we absolutely have an obligation to guarantee the human capital necessary to support those institutions as they grow. I think there is no doubt that we're a high-cost area. Connecticut's never going to be a low-cost area. It's just not going to happen. Proximity to New York City, constrained geography, zoning, which doesn't allow a lot of things to happen in a lot of places, is going to continue to drive high cost. But you're absolutely right. And therefore, we have to find the ways and the industries in which we can compete, which quite clearly represents everybody around this table, who aren't the highest cost, well, perhaps with your exception, aren't the highest cost of products to bring to market. So this is the sweet spot. We want to be working on it. And then Catherine?
I wanted to just talk a minute about branding too, because that was raised as a really important factor. And last week we issued an RFP, which is the first time in many years, I think, with the governor's support, with the legislator's support, and we'll be going to market to actually build a brand for the state and use some dollars to advertise. And we have $15 million to spend over the next 2 years to make that all happen. And I'm really excited about this because we're not just looking at how to bring more tourism into the state, which we have done traditionally with the advertising dollars that have been allocated. This is going to be a program that really looks to create a brand for Connecticut, and I think, you know, at least in my mind, we're not going to prejudge the outcome because we're going to do this the good old-fashioned way. We're actually going to do some research and look at our skill sets and make sure we come up with some brand messaging that actually resonates quite well with the state. But to me, one of the messages from our past has been about innovation, as the governor was mentioning, and a way to get back to that in our branding and look to try to make it happen. But we're going to brand the state for tourism, but also really look for branding this place as a great place to grow an innovative business, to settle into family, to really start putting Connecticut literally and figuratively back on the map in terms of its potential for really developing economic benefit, both for the individual and the
And in case $15 million doesn't sound like a lot of money, the last 2 years we spent $1.
That's a marginal improvement.
The marginal improvement.
So I think it's really important, and then it comes down, you know, all of the branding also comes to, you know, as it was pointed out, is, you know, trying to get us more of that ecosystem or innovation. So we would welcome your ideas as we go through this process. We're hoping to do some research during the course of the fall. First, we'll select some companies, some vendors to work with, to do this work with us, and then we'll be in the process of really listening around getting input from folks like you and others in the state to really try to build that brand in a positive way. So please, if you're interested in helping us, we'd love to have you.
You know, just a comment you made. I've now lived in 10 cities in the United States and 9 other countries, including Silicon Valley, and where every kid wants to grow up to found a company. And that infrastructure ecosystem, I think, is something which makes a difference there. Also, by the way, even in terms of cost, I've lived in Germany, which is the highest labor costs in the world, and yet by far the highest per capita exports and manufactured goods, per capita way ahead of China, second overall to China. It's feasible, and your idea of the education is important, but what makes it happen in Germany is the partnership. And by the way, there are companies in Connecticut, a lot of mid-sized companies. It isn't United Technologies or whatever. It's the mid-sized $100, $200 million companies, which are exporting manufactured goods from Connecticut to Germany. And they exist. And I think we're probably not doing enough to help the companies which could go into that category to be in the category. A little bit different from this table. But I think that, and that would help the entrepreneurs, knowing that there's hope.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. We funded a study which established that there were 5,216 companies in Connecticut doing business in a foreign country, 60% of which are only doing business with one other country. And if we could just double that, you know, we could get that 60% to do business with two. We're talking about adding thousands and thousands of jobs. And so we do have I don't want you to think we're not paying attention to that. We will have better programs designed to make the contact necessary for people to have that comfort level. And by the way, not surprisingly, the 2 biggest countries that we're doing business with are Mexico and Canada. Yeah. But how do we, except in the aerospace industry, which is actually does very well in the European marketplace. Yes?
If I may.
Sure.
Just to connect a few dots here. We talked about innovation, and I feel like we've used that loosely somewhat. And going around the table here, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of our businesses are in digital media, internet spaces. Connecting that to job creation, which you spoke about, that is the fastest growing area for both jobs in the U.S. and jobs that we export outside of the U.S. Right? So I think the focus in digital media, advertising, internet technology would help with the job creation in the state and would also help support us. Also linking that to, and this is something that I'm sure everybody here is curious about, is if we're really focused on innovation here in Connecticut, and most of us here, I know we've talked to investors in the state, and we've talked to investors outside of the state. My take is that when I speak about my technology to people in New York City and Silicon Valley, they get it. They're excited about it. They want to invest in it. But in my experience is that in Connecticut, and I am, by the way, I'm a chemical engineer, I come from the hardware stuff, right? But I feel like we're still very much focused on that. The medical devices, the hardware, not a lot of focus on digital media. I think we need that shift in our mindset to get, we're talking about branding, but there's nobody, I think we would be your brand if we are successful. In speaking about, our experiences within the state, outside of the state. I think, honestly speaking, coming from New York here, and having had the experience in both places, at this point in time, right now, I wouldn't be a great brand for you, so to speak. I wouldn't be a great advocate for what I've experienced in Connecticut so far. And realizing that we are a community and it's up to us to change that. But we need a support system. And we need a support system from you, we need it from the investors, we need it from Patty, from what you're doing here, which I think is great. But we need that shift in mindset. We need concrete actions beyond branding. Like what's the messaging behind the branding? Yes, we have that. But what are the actions behind that?
From the perspective of this center, I think your comments are spot on in terms of what we're trying to do here. And I think that what's really interesting is within this community the level of entrepreneurship, the level of interesting, really exciting ideas in a bunch of different areas. And what we're trying to do, and Patty really is leading the charge, is to create a venue to support these things, not only as individuals, but also a community and where ideas can cross-pollinate and where investors can feel comfortable that the companies that are here and associated with the center are vetted and are appropriate and have a vision and the kind of support and the kind of assistance that will help create that brand and create that excitement here. And I know that all of us are really excited about the level of support and interest that's being shown by the state. Hopefully this will be the first of many things, and forums and ongoing development that will happen around this building, around this center.
And if I might add, Kip Bergstrom, who was not able to be with us today, is on my team. He's a deputy commissioner for the Department of Economic and Community Development. Many of you may know him from his work here in Stamford Innovation Center. And I think Kip is responsible in my group for really working on how to build this ecosystem we've just been talking about and alluding to. He also has the brand work. I agree with you. You have to brand something that actually has some substance to it, right? But Kip is responsible for doing that. Now you'll see some ideas that come forward in the special session because we've already got a list of those things. But part of it is to make the connections, to do the convening, because it's a bit amorphous building that kind of ecosystem. It's cultural change as well as really individuals, legislative type change. But we are absolutely committed to trying to make that happen, and we will need the support of organizations like Stamford Innovation and individuals such as yourselves to really start making that happen.
But actually, I just want to, if I can,